a lot of people have difficulty writing because we're maybe worried about what the end result should look like. Do you think? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you agree with that? Mm-hmm. Does that sometimes make it difficult for you? Mm-hmm. So when you sit down to write your first attempt, you're having difficulty writing it because you're worried about what it's going to look like at the end, which is the copy you're going to submit. Right, where's the sense in that then? You're talking about the first time you put something on paper, which is here, but you're worrying about what's happening here at the very, very end. So what's in the middle of all that then? I mean, are any of you the sort of person who can sit down for the very first time when they've got something to write and just write it in one go, and that's your end product? You don't have to change anything about the structure, you don't have to revise it, you don't have to edit it. Hands up anybody who can do that? You can write it. Yeah?
I keep it in my head for so long that where usually when it comes to writing it, it's pretty much...
Right, so you don't need to edit then?
Well, a small amount, but I think because I sit and worry about it and think about it for so long rather than actually writing it.
Oh right, that's interesting.
But it takes me even longer to get it. I mean, I'm doing it part-time, so I've been working on this for months. I've been reading my literature for months. And I'll just read another article and I better just read that one and procrastinate and...
Sometimes some people use the research and planning what they're going to write to put off actually writing, actually putting it on paper, because they're frightened to start putting it on paper because they think it might not be good enough, or they won't be able to think of the words or how to structure it. Does that ring a bell with anybody? And again, that's because you're at the very start of the process, but again, you're thinking about the end of the process. So that acts as a block from you actually putting the stuff on paper. The first time you write anything, it's not going to be the finished article. No pun intended, it's not meant to be an article in your case. It's going to be something very messy. So you're being hampered there, sorry, I'm just going to try and fix that. You're being hampered there by worrying about how good it is at the very end, which is at the end of a great big long stage. It's a process rather than a stage of writing. Right, what I was trying to say is that you're worrying at the very beginning of something that is an extremely long process, which has many, many different steps in between the start and the finish. So you're tying yourself in knots thinking about the right word when you're going to be editing and correcting and reviewing. So at this stage, it doesn't matter about the right word, does it? It doesn't really matter. I mean, you're bound to come up with the right word at some point along the stage, along all of these stages. So what we want to do today is to try to stop worrying about, is it correct? Am I using the right word? Is what I'm writing absolutely accurate? Have I got that author's name right? Or you don't need to worry about the accuracy at the beginning. That's just going to stop you putting anything on paper. You don't want to worry about what the final polished, beautiful article will look like in terms of structure either, because you're going to have all these stages, as I say, to review it and keep going over it. So today we're going to try to get over worrying about how perfect and wonderful and elegant and perfectly structured our writing is. Okay? I don't know if you can see that. This is actually from a book by my hero Peter Elbow. And much as I've been teaching this workshop for ages and ages, I was just looking at his book again the other day, and I thought this was a good way to put out to put on paper or on screen what is actually happening in our brains when we're trying to write but almost putting blocks in our way. The problem is that to write, you all mentioned, a lot of people over here mentioned creativity, and we're talking about generating ideas, you've got all your reading, your lit review and everything. But at the same time you're thinking about, it's got to be very academic, it's got to be very structured, I've got this finished article that my supervisor expects to see. So you've got two things going on there. You've got creativity, which is at the start of the process, the generating. I mean, that will go through it, because obviously there's some judgment involved all the way through reviewing and editing stuff. But you're at the creatives end of things at the beginning, which is now. The problem is you've also got this skill about criticism, because you've all been reading everybody else's work, all the academic articles, and you've been getting trained as a researcher, which is what you are now, to be very critical of what you're reading, to see what's going on, to check the way things are written, to check the argument and structure. That's what you've been training in all the way through university and doing what you've got up to now. So you've got these two skills happening in your head simultaneously, but what you want to do at the beginning is get rid of the criticism part of it and just focus on the first part of it. You've got to stop worrying about the end result at the beginning. Are we all agreed that there's not an awful lot of sense in worrying about how polished it is at the beginning? Does anybody disagree? So, I would like you to start writing without thinking about what you're writing. So, can you get a piece of paper out, please? And I'd like you to take 2 minutes to just write anything at all, anything that's in your head. Doesn't matter what it's about. It could be about what's happening here. It could be what am I supposed to be doing. Anything. The point is you should be writing without worrying about what you're writing. So I'll give you 2 minutes starting now to write. Let you off now. You can throw that away now if you like. The point of that is really just to try and get you to put something out of there onto there. That's all that's about, because that's what a lot of us keep resisting doing. And also, presumably, a lot of it will be rubbish, utter rubbish. That's not really a problem, is it? Because if that's a piece of writing that you're actually going to work on, you've got plenty of time to change that and correct it and put in the right words and the right structure and the right subject matter. But the point is to get it out of your head onto the paper. What we're going to do now is go a bit closer to what you're actually working on at the moment, and some methods that you can use to try and help you if you're having difficulty getting anything on the page. Now it obviously depends on what you're writing, and you may all be working on different chapters or whatever, or sections of your dissertation at the moment, so you have to work this part out for yourself. It depends slightly what the function of the chapter is that you're working on. Can everyone see that? Because what we do have to think about, although we're trying not to focus on the end result, is to try and generate ideas, is to remember some of these details, like why are you writing, the boring stuff. You know, if you were doing this normally at home, you'd be thinking about, well, when's the deadline? Because you have to manage your time for writing the same as you have to manage it for everything else. So you should be thinking about blocks of writing in your diary and amongst all the other work you've got.
Will we get a copy of these slides?
I can send it on later. As long as you've all put your matric number in with your name, I can send it on later. It says there, who is it for? And I would suggest that it's a good idea, particularly at the review stage of your writing, to think about it as being for maybe your supervisor, or if you can imagine the person who's going to be maybe marking your dissertation. So remember, it's a technical piece of work in your case, so you have to remember what function each section is supposed to fulfill and what the person will be looking for in each one of those sections. So you've got all these normal things that you have to think about as a dissertation student. Why am I writing this? That, again, it depends what you're actually writing and why you're doing it. If you're publishing something, why you're writing it to publish. So that doesn't really apply to you. What is it actually about? Just thinking about these things and writing down the answers can actually start generating things in your head. So that's what I want you to do now, is to just very quickly look at each one of these questions and write down for yourself what applies in your case. Write down the answers to all of those. So if you do that now, you don't always know what your line of argument is, but you should do if you're doing a dissertation. So what I want you to think about is, think about the key points that you want to get across in this particular thing that you're writing, or you're using this workshop to help you write. Think about the main points that you need to get across in order to fulfil the function of that section. Now, if you're confused about what you should be writing, try not to be. Just think anything off the top of your head. We worry a bit too much about what we should be writing, and that gets in the way of us actually doing it. Right, so we're all thinking in the back of our heads about what the piece is that we're working on. And we are also thinking about a supervisor or a marker and what elements they are looking for in this piece that we're writing. So what I want you to think about now is your audience. We're going to get rid of them to an extent later on, but think about your audience. But I want you to move on to a different audience now, not just the supervisor. The supervisor can be one of the people in your audience, but I want you to try and think of 3 different people that you might actually try to explain what you're writing about to, okay? So try to think about 3 people. Now, they don't need to be academics. One of them can be your supervisor, if you like. One of them could be your flatmate who's studying a completely different subject. Okay, one of them might be your granny, who is very intelligent but is not a subject specialist in this area, and she may not have been to university, so she doesn't understand how these things work. So if you can imagine 3 people, can you do that now? And imagine the 3 people. Dissertation supervisor's already there, so you've got two other people to think about, okay? Have you thought of 2 people? Yeah? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
You sure?
Yeah.
Granny?
Dad.
Okay, fair enough. Right, you've all got people in your mind. You can picture these people, can you? Right, now what I want you to do is to think about sitting having a chat with these people. If it's your granny or whatever, you're maybe sitting in her house or in a coffee shop somewhere, and granny has just said to you, "Oh, what is it you're writing about, son?" Or tell me what it is you're writing at university. So imagine how you would tell them about this chapter, this section that you're writing, what the point of it is, and what you're going to put in it. So just gaze into the sky or at the ceiling, or shut your eyes and think about yourself telling the granny or the flatmate about this, okay? You can shut your eyes, you can look at the floor, you can do whatever you like while you're thinking about that. And when you're explaining it to the person, they might say, "I don't understand that bit." So you might have to think of another way to explain it to them. You're imagining 2 people, like a flatmate or a friend or your grandmother or someone, and then imagine yourself explaining to them the thing you're writing about now. Right, what I would like you to do now is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's excellent. In 3s, I want you to work together, and you've got a minute each. So, for example, you will explain to your 2 neighbours here about the thing you're going to write, what it's all about. Yeah, and then you will explain the 2, and then you will explain the 2. Okay, right, and can you all do that in your 3s? So that's another 3, and then you're the start of another 3 there. Okay, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now, what I would like you to do now is, can you remember the kind of what we call rapid writing, or spew writing it is often called, that you did earlier on? That was off topic. This time you're going to write on topic, which is the thing that you've just been explaining to everybody. But I want you to try to remember what we were talking about earlier, this keeping the creative part of it, this very beginning part of it, separate from the criticism part, and just write. Now I want you to write on what you've explained and do the same thing as you did the last time. Try not to stop the pen moving, keep moving it the whole time. So you're going to write it's not really a draft, but it's going to be a first attempt at the thing you're going to write. So you're going to keep writing. Don't worry about an introductory section or introductory paragraph. You're just writing stuff that's in your head on this. Keep writing. Don't worry about whether you're using the correct word or the most accurate phrase for it. If you can't think of the right word, because when we're writing we get stuck and think, oh, you know, what should I write here? Just write any word, even if you know it's wrong. You can underline it and come back to it later. Just keep writing, go on to the next sentence, the next thing. Just do not stop. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes now to write on the thing that you've just been explaining to your neighbours. If anybody wants to get a wee bit further away from anybody to do this, then there's a couple of spare desks and chairs. You can do that if you want, but you're going to have 10 minutes and you just keep writing. Do not pause. If you find yourself pausing, just write anything, underline it, and then move on to the next thing that comes into your head about this chapter or section. So start now, please, and try to be really disciplined with yourself and force yourself to keep going. Trying to focus down the ideas a bit more towards what you need to do. So I'd like you to now write one sentence, condense the thing that you're writing about or you've just been writing about into one sentence to try and clarify what the actual main point of this is. So one sentence, please. Right, we're just going to give your heads a break from that for a moment. And look at some methods that we can use to start focusing down the ideas once you've written a lot of stuff there and you don't know what to do with it. Sometimes you just write a lot of random stuff and you can't figure out what order it should be in. But that's the way it should start at the beginning. It should be messy at the beginning. You're getting more and more tidy towards the end. So there are a number of different things you can do. Some people like to use mind maps. You know, does everyone know Tony Buzan's mind map? No? Never heard of that? If you're having difficulty generating ideas, although I would suggest that if you do this you probably won't have, you can look at Tony Buzan books. The name's spelled B-U-Z-A-N, and I think his first book was just the basic mind map book. And they usually stock several copies of these in the university libraries. And it's a method that he uses or suggests to generate ideas. Now, it can be used to generate ideas, but it can also be used if you have lots and lots of information because you've been doing all your research and writing stuff down, and you've got so much that you don't know how it all connects with each other when you're starting to think of structure. So you can also use it for that. It's basically using a kind of visual layout to try and help you figure out the connections between all the different things that you're trying to write about. So you can have a look at that if you want. This method though is for those of us who like to think we're more organised and logical, but it still involves the word random. What you can also do, and if anybody wants to try this, you could do it now, thinking about what you've been writing, try to think about random major key words or phrases to do with that subject and just write them down, not in any order. So if anybody wants to try this now, they can do that. So you write all those down and you should end up with a couple of columns of words. And what you can do if you want to try and figure out what order these things should come in is try to see what function do each of these key words or phrases fall under. And here's some suggested kind of subheadings and visible subheadings that you could use. Some of it might be evidence, so you might stick it under evidence. In that case, at the end of having done this, you'll have a lump of evidence, so you should know what order it goes into. Some of it may be your motivation for what you've done here. Some of it will just be background detail, so that should help you to put all of the information that you've written down in some order. That's one other way to do it. As I say, the mind map thing is quite a good idea for trying to organise your work. The other thing that you could do is the stuff that you've written just now. If you were to go through that again, you'll think, oh, a lot of that's rubbish and doesn't make any sense. But what you should do is maybe go through it and look for the bits that are useful, that do look good, and try to differentiate those from the ones you think, well, why did I write that? Was that just mince that came out of my head that's no use? Is it not possible for me to use that? So you could maybe go through the stuff that you've written and number it, you sort of prioritise what is important and what is useful and what is not. So you could number it all the useful bits, having chucked out all the non-useful bits. And the number, it would be the order that you would put them in the actual piece of writing that you're going to do. So you could do it that way, which is a fairly random way to do it, but that might work. What we're going to do now is to start revising. And today we have the advantage of having some guinea pigs in the room. Those are your neighbours who have been helping you out so far when you explained the piece of writing to them earlier on. So what we want you to do is, you've each got your 10-minute piece of writing there. Have you all got your 10-minute piece of writing? And if you remember, you explained to your partner the way, not necessarily the way you would to your granny, but you did explain earlier on in a couple of minutes each what you were writing about. So they should all remember what you said. Now what you want to do now is each read each other's 10-minute piece of writing. Now what I want you to do is read it from start to finish without stopping, and then set it over and just think, right, what do I think about that? Is the meaning and the key point or key points coming through in what they've written? If it's not, think, well, why is it not? Should it be in a different order? Is there something missing here? And I would like you to just write down a paragraph, say, or some bullet points of very clearly written feedback for your neighbour. Okay, so you're going to have 2 lots of feedback to give out here. So try to keep it quite tidy, your writing, so that they can read it, because they're going to be able to use that afterwards. Okay? So if you could do that now, swap over your writing. So read it straight through, beginning to end. If you can't read it because someone's writing isn't clear enough, ask the writer to read it out loud to the other 2. Okay? And if you have to read it out loud, don't apologise for anything that you've written, for any mistakes, or don't be embarrassed. Just read exactly the words that you wrote. Okay, so reading everybody's work, and make your bullet points after you've read it. Think now, what about the clarity of this? What could be done to improve the clarity so that the idea comes across?